Hey there, and welcome to another video. That was a bit loud, wasn't it? I was screaming into the mic there. Um, Today I'm going to be doing a ranking video. I haven't done one, I think, for about 6 months. And I was sort of just looking through my CDs, and I thought I want to go with someone who's got a fairly sizable discography. And I thought Cannibal Corpse got 15 albums, and I'll give that a crack. What's to be said about Cannibal Corpse? You know, arguably the biggest death metal band of all time. Sold the most amount of albums, I think, and just a very well respected band. A band that I think haven't had too many sort of dips in their career. Not quality of music wise, it's a very even discography for the most part. There's no like absolute albums that suck, and they got some absolutely great and classic material as well. And also one of the few bands, if you look at bands who've been able to survive losing, a main sort of singer, but also the front piece of the band, like Chris Barnes was such a integral part of that early success and notoriety of Cannibal Corpse, with the lyrics and just like the general vibe of the band. And for them to come back after that and just go from strength to strength and just tour their ass off, not care what anyone thought, and basically build another fan base alongside the people who stuck with them from the early days. So yeah, I've got a lot of respect for Cannibal Corpse. Are they my favorite death metal band? No, but I absolutely do love them. They've worked their ass off to get where they are, and they deserve everything they've gotten. So yeah, I'll be going through the 15 albums from my least favorite to my favorite. As I was going through, I sort of realized that I couldn't find Eaten Back to Life. I think I've got it. It's in my collection somewhere, but it's hiding somewhere. So I can't go looking for it all day. And I thought I'll just stick a little picture up or whatever when I get to that point. So yeah, the mystery of where Eaten Back to Life has gone, I have no idea. My history with Cannibal Corpse started with I think it was about 94, where I actually bought it was like a double CD of Eaten Back to Life and Butchered at Birth. Obviously, I'd read about them in magazines, and at that time, I was listening to a lot of sort of Sepultura and Death and stuff like that, and was basically on that trajectory as you are when you're a young person listening to heavy metal and heavier music, that you're just looking for the next extreme thing. And reading about them in magazines, the notoriety, the bannings in Germany and all that kind of jazz. Yeah, I got my local CD shop had the Butchered at Birth, Eaten Back to Life double CD, and obviously I see the cover art for Butchered at Birth and never seen anything like it. I knew it was going to annoy my parents, so I wanted it. And yeah, I grabbed it, and it was extreme. It was shocking. It was not only just the artwork and the lyrics, but vocally, I hadn't really listened to material or bands with that sort of vocal style that you could barely make anything out. That was just a really low growl rumble sort of voice. I think in hindsight, when I remember back to having that double CD, I was more drawn to I was more able to grasp the Eaten Back to Life material because at the time, because it was more sort of thrashy, and the riffs were more in what I'd been used to, and also Barnes's voice was a bit more less extreme. Also the drumming, a bit more thrash side. I don't recall there being any blast beats on Eaten Back to Life. That sort of came in on Butchered, where Paul Mazurkiewicz sort of, I'd say he started that hammering of the drums, the bomb blast as they call it. So yeah, took it to school, took that CD to school. All my friends wanted to borrow it. They didn't necessarily like it, but they liked the fact that it annoyed people and pissed people off, and they just wanted to be cool. So whenever I'd ask them, oh, hey, what did you think of it? Oh, yeah, not really into the music, but I like the artwork and the lyrics and whatnot. The CD actually got confiscated from a friend I lent it to, and I had a teacher come up to me in the playground and go, "Does this belong to you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." And he was absolutely shocked and basically thought I was a serial killer. And yeah, didn't want to give me the CD back, but I got the CD back. So yeah, Cannibal Corpse back then were very offensive and shocking to people. It wasn't like now where like a guy like Corpse Grunter's almost got this sort of comic book sort of vibe to him, where people are just I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there's no sort of and it's different times. This is 30 years ago, and it was very shocking. Also in Australia with Cannibal Corpse, we had very high censorship of their stuff. It was, even though I got that double CD and it had the actual artwork, I recall around probably 94, 95 as well, that they did reissues of all the albums up to that point, and they all had just plain white covers. There was just nothing. Still full price, white covers, censored everywhere. I remember when Vile came out, it was just a black cover with this thin strip around it, just to keep you safe. The government wanted to keep us safe. Yeah, so they were notorious, back in the day. And there's no doubt their success these days was built off the back of that notoriety. Also with good music, because you don't get to get to where they've gotten to and end up supporting Slayer and all that kind of stuff without. Actually, no, some crap bands have supported Slayer, so that point doesn't make sense. But you get what I'm saying. You don't get to achieve the success they have, without sort of there being some decent music there. So anyway, I'll stop talking shit and get into the ranking. So coming in at 15, I've opted to go for Red Before Black. This one, well, I like it. It's to me, it was the least interesting. It just seemed a bit more straightforward. Seemed to lack a bit of energy compared to some of the previous ones, and a little bit less technical, bit more stripped back. It's got some decent songs on it, Red Before Black, Only One Will Die, Code of the Slashers. Basically, to me, it's quite top heavy. I like the opening 3 or 4 tracks. Then it sort of just seems to not really do a lot for me. Not a bad album at all, but something had to come in last, and unfortunately or fortunately, it is Red Before Black. I like the artwork though; it's pretty cool. Looking at the perspective of the victim and this crazed killer with his eyes, just he's on some sort of drugs. So yeah, good artwork, but yeah, my least favorite Cannibal Corpse album. Number 14. This one gets talked about a lot as one of their better albums. It never did it for me, still doesn't. I had to listen to it last night, and it's still not. Yeah, it just doesn't hit me. And the production for me isn't that strong either. We're going with Bloodthirst from '99, I think it was. Colin Richardson produced this one, so going off previous Colin Richardson productions, it should be pretty damn good. But I don't know, there's just something about this one. The guitar sounds a bit scratchy and not thin, but it's just not where it needs to be. The drums sound a bit processed. It's and just the songs don't seem to do a lot for me. Raped by the Beast is by far my favorite song on this album. Yeah, it's not bad. Like I said before, this whole collection of albums is all pretty solid, and Cannibal Corpse are a band where you know what you're going to get. But I'd say, yeah, for some reason, this one doesn't really do it for me like it does for some people. I've heard some people say it's one of their favorite Cannibal Corpse albums, but for me, it's just not the case. So that is number 14, 1999's Bloodthirst. Number 13, we have the most recent album, Violence Unimagined. I thought this was a step up from the previous one, Red Before Black. Some more interesting songs. It sounded a bit more, again, it's sort of going in that more stripped back, less technical vein of compared to some of their other stuff. But I just thought the songs were better on this one. Inhuman Harvest. I think that was the first single. But Bound and Burned. That's a great one. Follow the Blood. First album with Eric Rutan actually joining the band. He'd produced quite a few of their albums previous to that. But yeah, it's a solid album. It's nothing really stood out and sort of blew me away. I thought the production was a lot better than some of the previous Rutan productions. He seems a bit inconsistent to me. Like sometimes he has a really good sounding album, then you get something like the next album I'm going to talk about, which I really don't like the production on. But solid stuff, but it's got to come in at like third least favorite. Number 12, we have Evisceration Plague. This has got some really good songs on it as well. It's just more the production tends to annoy me on this one. I can really notice it in To Decompose at the start, where you got that ultra technical. I think it's a Pat O'Brien riff, maybe. It sounds like him anyway. It's just got that real ultra technical sort of single note riffing going on, and it just sounds a bit sloppy. And Cannibal haven't really been that like a sloppy band. They've always been quite precise, you know, if you take away some of the earlier stuff. I'm not saying it, maybe it's a performance issue rather than a production issue, but yeah, and it just sounds a bit, the guitars are a bit muffled or something. It's not my cup of tea. Yeah, Two Decompose is a great song. Priest of Sodom, A Cauldron of Hate. It's got some really good stuff, but sort of yeah, I think the production is the main issue I had with this one. Has some ultra technical, more technical stuff than they'd been doing at that point. That sort of came in from Kill. They started going a bit more technical, even though they were doing that before. But I noticed a shift with the Kill album. But yeah, anyway, number 12, Evisceration Plague. Number 11, this sort of came in the period where I wouldn't say they were losing ground or popularity, but maybe it was just the whole death metal scene at the time in around 2004 or whatever. It sort of, there was a couple of albums of theirs that sort of just flew by without much fanfare. And this was one of them, and that's The Wretched Spawn. Again, really solid stuff. They went through a different producer this time, Neil Kernan. I think it was in Texas somewhere. I can't remember the name of the studio. They went there for Gore Obsessed, which was after Bloodthirst. So yeah, that one album sort of tryout with Colin Richardson sort of just ended there. And then they tried Neil Kernan out. Yeah, this has got some good stuff. I really like the opening 3 tracks: Severed Head Stoning, Psychotic Precision, Decency Defiled. You know, Frantic Disembowelment's a cool song. I sort of, some of the lower tuned, slower stuff on this isn't really my cup of tea. I think Jack Owen maybe wrote some of that stuff. Festering in the Crypt. You know, there's some good stuff, but it's just not that great. And I think they seem to be losing a bit of energy or something around this period. And then they came back with Kill after this. And I think that's when they definitely picked up a lot in, well, at least in popularity. They seemed to, that was like a second wind for them or something. So, yeah, good album. Not brilliant, but pretty damn solid with some good stuff. Last album with Jack Owen as well. I think that was number 10 we're up to. I've gone with Kill. This one's never been a huge favorite of mine, but I do like some of the tracks. And again, it was, like I said before, a bit of a turning point for the band. Jack Owen had left. I think Rob Barrett comes back for this one, and just that Rob Barrett, Pat O'Brien, just a great team, basically. Or they made a great team. It's sort of, I think Rob Barrett sort of writes more straightforward stuff, sort of in the vein of, I think Jack Owen was sort of similar. He'd write more straight down the line stuff, whereas Pat O'Brien was like the maniac writing a lot of the technical stuff. Or I think on the DVD, they actually mentioned that basically O'Brien could play whatever those guys threw at him. Like, so Alex Webster's writing some ultra techy sort of stuff, you know, that was no problem. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, Kill, really good album. Sort of smack bang in the middle of the discography of what I like. What do we got here? You know, you got Make Them Suffer, which is probably the hit from the album. Time to Kill Is Now. Necrosadistic Warning. The great title, Five Nails Through the Neck. What I find with some of these Cannibal albums is that they got some gems towards the end of the albums that sort of, it'll be definitely front loaded, but then it might die off in the middle a bit, but then they got some little hidden gems towards the end. Especially I've noticed that on the Torture album, which I'll get to a bit later. But anyway, number 10, Kill. Okay, number 9, we have, let me just get rid of the slipcase. We have Vile from 96, I'm pretty sure it was. I still remember getting this when it came out, except this is a rebuy. The other one I had was the black one I was talking about before, the censored version. It was pretty disappointing, actually, because I was such a huge fan of The Bleeding. Obviously, I knew that there was going to be a vocalist change with Barnes leaving and then Corpse Grundy coming in. They tuned down. You could tell there was a difference in tuning and stuff. So things got a lot more technical after The Bleeding. That was their most catchy sort of, you know, I don't want to say untechnical, but things were definitely more technical on this and was the catalyst for where they moved forward in their career. You know, obviously Devoured by Vermin is a classic. Mummified in Barbed Wire. Perverse Suffering, I'm pretty sure that's a Jack Owen song, and it's really, really good song. I think that was the first song I heard, actually. It was on a radio show. This sort of loses me a bit with Disfigured and Bloodlands. And then there's a few. Orgasm Through Torture is a pretty cool song, but there's a couple sort of heading in towards the back that are a bit, don't want to say filler, but they're a bit weaker than, you know, the front. Yeah, it's a good album, but I thought it was a massive step down from The Bleeding back in the day, and still at the moment. Although I will put it on and enjoy it, but yeah, it is what it is. Okay, number 8. I've gone with Gore Obsessed, and it's one of the ones that's sort of hidden in the middle of that period, say from Gallery of Suicide up until what's that one? The Wretched Spawn, you know, where they weren't really on everyone's radar. They weren't sort of the big band they are now and really popular. They were doing their thing, always touring, always just sticking to what they do, but the limelight had sort of gone off them, I'd say, for a bit. And maybe it was more of a state of how things were in the death metal scene. Yeah, this is pretty underrated, I think, in their discography. I think it was the first one that they got. Yeah, Neil Kernon. I'm reading that now. Neil Kernon, it's the first one he did with them after Colin Richardson done Bloodthirst. My favorite track on this would have to be Drowning in Viscera. You got Pit of Zombies as well. Dormant Bodies Bursting. It's Cannibal Corpse doing what they do. I'd say it's a bit more interesting than Bloodthirst, quite a bit. Bloodthirst seemed a bit more, you know, Cannibal Corpse are a brutal band, but you know, it seemed to be that was the main goal of that, rather than writing good catchy songs. I find that the songwriting is way better on this album, and that's why it's sort of smack bang in the middle of the pile for me. You know, I'll reach for this way more than you know, Bloodthirst. Number 8. Is A Skeletal Domain. Probably one of their better sounding albums for me, like one of the best produced. I can't recall the guy who did it. I was just listening to this last night. And opening track, fantastic. High Velocity, Impact Spatter, Sadistic Embodiment, Killer Become, Headlong into Carnage. I played that like 3 times in a row last night. Brilliant. Murderous Pact sounds very I don't know if it was Pat O'Brien. I'll have to check the credits, but sort of reminiscent of like Nevermore. So there's probably a high chance that it was a Pat O'Brien. Love the lyrics to Hollowed Bodies. I was reading the lyrics last night and thought they were really cleverly done. And that's another thing to say, like, Chris Barnes sort of started the whole thing within Cannibal Corpse of writing those lyrics. But, yes, the lyrics over the years haven't been as shocking and just gruesome for gruesome's sake. But very well written, very well thought out, very well structured lyrics in these Cannibal Corpse albums. And Paul Mazurkiewicz seems to write quite a lot of lyrics. Really good lyric writer. And yeah, there's some fine examples of good lyrics on this album. So yeah, for one of the later albums, this is probably one of my picks, A Skeletal Domain. All right, coming at number 6 is Butchered at Birth. Not much to say about this one. It's an absolute classic. Probably more so for the striking artwork than the music itself. Musically, it is solid, but it's how could that not be shocking? It's still shocking to this day. If I took this into work or someplace, I'd get sacked. Yeah, it's great stuff. Back in the day, I tried really hard to get into it. But basically it wasn't off the music. It wasn't until later when I re-listened to it that I started enjoying it more for the music. It was more back in the day. It was about shock value, heaviness, and all that kind of stuff. Gutted, that's a great song. They still play that live. Meat Hook Sodomy, classic. In Its Decay, I think that's probably my favorite off the album, the final track. Always sort of had that real catchy riff. Covered with Sores, again, I think they still play that pretty often. Vomit the Soul has lyrics by Glenn Benton. Not lyrics, vocals by Glenn Benton. So yeah, not much to say. Classic Morrisound production as well. So but yeah, things were getting quite heavy. Number 5, and because I don't have it, well, I can't find the physical copy. I will put a picture of it up here, maybe about there. Eaten Back to Life. Very thrash influenced, still heading into that death realm, but there was no discounting their thrash influences. Again, you had the striking artwork with the guy ripping his guts out in the graveyard. Seeing that would have been, back in 1990 would have been just like, oh, I've got to buy that. So, they're at the forefront, of getting people interested just from the packaging. It's almost got that Iron Maiden sort of, how Maiden would have been in the 80s. Kids were just attracted to those album covers. Whereas with Cannibal Corpse, people were attracted or either repulsed, but they were still talking about it. So, Edible Autopsy is probably the favorite track off Eaten Back to Life. Opening with the fantastic Shredded Humans. The lyrics are great. Production wise, it's sort of reminiscent of what Morrisound were doing around that time, 1990. Say the first Deicide, even like Beneath the Remains. It's just got that. Actually, was Beneath the Remains recorded at Morrisound? I don't think it was. I just think Scott Burns was part of it. But definitely the first Deicide. It's got that sort of quite similar drum sound, maybe. Skull Full of Maggots. It's chock full of great songs. But yeah, really good, fun death thrash album. Vocally, Barnes was sort of, I'd say he was slightly deeper than, say like a Millie Petrosa and what the thrash bands were doing at the time. So he was sort of in that half in, half out style. He hadn't gone full growl, but he still wasn't doing the thrash thing. But obviously in the next album, Butchered all the way doing the ooh. So yeah, classic album. Not much to really say about that one. Number 4, the legendary Tomb of the Mutilated. So if you thought the parents of kids were pissed off with Butchered at Birth and they come home with Tomb of the Mutilated, yeah, they were again pissed off. This version actually came from England. My mum brought it back from, she was over there when I was a kid. So I think I've had this copy since I was about 15, and it came like that with the censored version. So she loved it when I took it out and quickly changed the cover to the proper cover, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I bought that for you." Yeah, this one production wise sort of stepped up and sort of saw where they were going production wise into territory of like the Bleeding. It was a lot more clearer, a lot tighter. Pretty sure on that Centuries of Torment DVD, I think that's what it's called. Jack Owen done all the rhythm tracks on this album because he was the tighter guitar player, and that ended up being an issue. And you know, one of the main reasons for Bob Rousset to get told to lead the band, because he just wasn't growing as a musician, and sort of yeah. So Jack Owen was the better rhythm player, and yeah, that's how it was done. So yeah, a lot tighter, a lot more offensive with the song titles, which I won't go through. Contains the classic Hammer Smash Face. It's sort of a bit like that Enter Sandman. You know, I can go without hearing Hammer Smash Face, you know, again in my lifetime. Icon Blood, great track. But yeah, got some absolutely classic songs. They were definitely going in a more refined direction, I'd say, after Butchered. Butchered was pretty savage and sort of yeah, I wouldn't say catchy, whereas there's some definite catchy moments on this album which would lead into the Bleeding. But yeah, total classic. Number 3, this one might surprise some people, but I love this album, Torture. It's just absolute riffs, some of their best songs. You know, the opening tracks of Demented Aggression, Sarcophagic Frenzy, Scourge of Iron, which seems to be like their go-to opening track quite a bit. Encased in Concrete, one of my favorite tracks on the album, Intestinal Crank. This one seems to have quite a few awesome tracks in the sort of later part of the album. Great lyrics. I think, yeah, I was really surprised with this one. I didn't expect it to be so good. And it's one of my go-to Cannibal Corpse albums. So yeah, anyone who's got to a certain point in Cannibal Corpse's career and hasn't checked out Torture, I definitely recommend you check out Torture because it's got some great material on it. All right, number 2. Sorry, my nose is running. It's not COVID, but yeah, as soon as I started talking, I'm getting all this buildup of phlegm. Number 2. I don't really see this very high in people's rankings or just in general. If you look on Metal Archives, it doesn't really say much about this album being that great. It could be one of their lowest, rated albums. I absolutely love it. Since the day it came out, it's been one of my favorite. I think it's got some of the strongest batch of songs they've ever done. Gallery of Suicide. Yeah, I was going through it and trying to pick out a couple of songs that don't really do it for me. If I really had to, I'd probably go Every Bone Broken and Crushing the Despised, maybe. Up until that point, you got, I Will Kill You, Disposal of Body, Sentence to Burn, Blood Drenched Execution, Gallery of Suicide, Dismembered and Molested. From Skin to Liquid is an absolute classic song. It's instrumental, but what can I say? It's so good. My favorite song on the album, though, Stabbed in the Throat. I love that song. It's an absolute classic. So yeah, this one doesn't get much love that I've noticed, but for me, it's right up there. It's, if I'm putting on a Cannibal Corpse album, in fact, I just had it on then. Not that you can hear it because my mic's not good, but yeah, it comes in at number 2. On, depending on my mood, it could go to number 1. In fact, it has been number 1 before, but today I just decided to put it at number 2 because mainly for nostalgic reasons. Number 1, The Bleeding. I thought they really hit their the pinnacle of their catchiness and songwriting on this in that early era. Like obviously moving on from Vile, that's when they got way more technical. This is still quite technical, but it's very compact. You know, the songs are very well structured. The riffs are just ultra catchy. And Barnes's last album, not as offensive on the lyrics or as you know, obviously the artwork was considered a major disappointment by the band. So who knows how, you know, more well accepted this album would have been with better artwork, but I'm used to it, and the album wouldn't be the same without that close up of the skin or whatever it is. Fucked with a Knife, Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead. Pulverized is, you know, one of my favorites on the album. Doesn't seem to, you don't really hear much about Pulverized. The Pickaxe Murders, The Bleeding, Force Fed Broken Glass. You know, it's great. The only track I'd probably say that I don't really rate overly highly is probably An Experiment in Homicide. The rest are just absolutely great. So yeah, Barnes's last album, first album that Rob Barrett came in on, and yeah, obviously because Bob Rousset left the band on the previous album. So yeah, that wraps up my album rankings for the legendary Cannibal Corpse. Number 1, The Bleeding. All right, thank you for watching. I will be doing probably a few more album ranking videos. Mainly, I'm going to try and do a few more of some bands with bigger discographies, just so you got more to talk about. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.